Before we dive into today's episode, I have something for you. Head to nancypanuccio.com/guide to download my free answer guide for first-time writers. In it, I'm answering the 10 questions I hear most when writers feel stuck. How do I stop second-guessing everything? How much backstory do I actually need? What do I do when my draft is a mess? You'll get honest answers and practical next steps for each question. That's nancypanuccio.com/guide. Okay, let's get into today's episode. It's your inquiry into your own material that matters. So don't judge the finished product before you've finished creating it. Just ask better questions. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and book coach. Each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now, let's begin. Whenever I ask writers what they're struggling with most right now, I get answers all over the map. Things like, I worry that my work isn't good enough. Is this boring? I can't keep a writing schedule even though I'm motivated. Fear keeps getting in the way. I can't move forward on editing my draft. Should I start marketing my book now even though I haven't finished writing it? I don't know what happens after I publish. I put 2 years into this and I want it to mean something. Okay, here's what's fascinating about these answers. They look like completely different struggles. One person thinks they're struggling with confidence. Another thinks they have a discipline problem. Others think they're struggling with plot or publishing logistics. But when I dig deeper, I discover they're all wrestling with the same thing. They're so fixated on the outcome, how it will be received ultimately. Like, will this be good? Will readers like it? Will this get published? They're so fixated on the outcome, they can't actually engage with the process of writing. They're trying to evaluate the end result before they've even created, finished, or brought the work to a publishable level. So they're focused on outcome, not on process. So today we're going to talk about why process beats outcome every single time and how shifting your focus can unstick you from problems and challenges you've been wrestling with for months, maybe even years. And I'll help reframe outcome-based thinking with process-based thinking so you can enjoy the writing process more and make more progress. When you focus on outcome, you're doing what the acting coach Benjamin Mathis calls plating the dish. So when he's coaching actors, he talks about the stages of cooking as a metaphor for creative work. First, you source your ingredients, then you prepare the ingredients, you wash them, you chop them, you measure. Then you cook them, you apply heat, you let the flavors meld and develop. And finally, only finally, after you've done all that, you plate the dish for presentation. But here's what happens if you plate too early. The food loses its integrity. You prioritized how it looked over how it tasted, and now it's beautiful, but it's inedible. And this is exactly what happens when you focus on outcomes instead of process. When you ask things like, is this good enough? While you're still drafting, while you're still cooking, you're trying to evaluate the plating, the finished product before you've finished. And just like food that's plated too soon, your work will lose integrity. The momentum dies. You can't move forward because You're focused on presentation when you should be focused on writing. And here's the truth. You don't know if it's good enough yet. You won't know until you finish the draft and let it rest and read it through, revise it, maybe get feedback and revise again. You'll go through several passes on the way to your story being publish ready. When you sit down to write and your brain immediately starts asking, is this good? Is it good enough? You're not actually writing anymore. You're judging your work, and you can't create and evaluate simultaneously. Your brain literally can't do both at once. Imagine a potter at the wheel. The clay is spinning. Their hands are shaping it, and every 30 seconds they stop to ask, is this beautiful? Will people want to buy this? Is this as good as that bowl I saw at the craft fair? So what happens? The clay collapses, the momentum stops, the creative flow is completely disrupted. That's what happens when you write a chapter or you're 50 pages in or 100 pages in and you immediately ask, is this good enough? You start to doubt yourself. You've just interrupted the creation process to perform a completely different mental task, evaluation, judgment. And now you're stuck because you can't move forward until you answer a question that can't be answered yet. Okay, so what questions should you be asking? How do you convert outcome questions to process questions? Outcome question. Is this boring? Process question. What's happening in this scene? What does my character want right now in this scene? Outcome question. Is my protagonist likable enough? Will anyone care about him? Process question. What does my protagonist care about? What are they afraid of? How are they getting in their own way? Outcome question. Will readers understand this? Will they get it? Process question. What information does the reader have at this point in the story? What information should they have? What do they need? What can I withhold? See the difference? Outcome questions send you spiraling into anxiety because they can't be answered yet, for one, and they're not serving you at this stage of the writing process. Process questions give you something concrete to work with right now, something to work towards. Process questions give you answers based on what your vision of your story is. Each answer leads you to the next question, which leads to another answer, and you make progress without ever stopping to judge whether the work is good enough. For example, let's say you're completely stuck on your opening chapter and you keep rewriting it, and you're still stuck. Every time you sit down to write, you're asking yourself, is this opening good enough to hook a reader? Is it good enough to hook an agent? That's an outcome question, and it paralyzes you. When writers get stuck here, they can't get past page 3 because they're constantly evaluating whether page 3 would be impressive enough to hook readers or land representation. But here's a process question. What's the first thing you want the reader to know about your protagonist? Maybe it's that she's been lying to herself for years about why her marriage failed. Okay, so then maybe show us a moment where that lie is visible. Write a scene where your protagonist meticulously reorganizes her ex-husband's belongings still in her garage, telling herself she's finally dealing with it while actually preserving everything exactly as it was. Now you have an opening you can work with. That doesn't mean you won't continue to refine it and maybe even change it, but it's a much better question. And you're answering a process question instead of trying to evaluate an outcome you haven't created yet. Now, this pattern shows up everywhere. Maybe you have a habit of abandoning your drafts halfway through, reading what you've written at page 50 or 100 and thinking, this is terrible, and stopping, or I'm overwhelmed. But of course, it doesn't look right yet. It's a first draft. You haven't spent enough time with your material probing the right questions that will make the writing of it more inquisitive and more enjoyable, more exciting. It's your inquiry into your own material That matters. So don't judge the finished product before you've finished creating it. Just ask better questions. Maybe you spend months perfecting your outline. That's staying in the prep phase because it feels safer. I've worked with many writers who perfect their outline over and over. And then when it comes time to write it, they have no idea how to start. Now, at some point, you have to actually write. And ironically, spending months on your outline often makes writing harder, not easier, because now you're focused on plot instead of character. Or maybe you have a hard time starting. The blank page can be intimidating. Now, you can say that's writer's block, but it's really being afraid that you're going to write something bad. You're so focused on the outcome. Will this be good? Do I even have what it takes to write this? That you can't even start. But here's the truth. You probably will write something bad before you loosen your muscles and write something that feels more alive, more truthful, more compelling. Some parts will feel spot on, others will drift, others will just be disorganized and have a lot of excess. Your first draft is supposed to be messy. That's what first drafts are for. It's like a big lump of clay that you need to sculpt. You can't revise what doesn't exist. Maybe you feel like you can't develop your character. You don't feel like you know your character. And that's usually an outcome question. Will readers find her likable? Will readers find her interesting? Outcome. Instead of what does she want? What does she fear? Process. Maybe you're worrying about agents and marketing before you've even finished. That's like trying to sell the house before you've built it. Finish the draft first. Only then think about querying agents. Maybe you're lacking courage and confidence. That's usually, what if I spend years on this and it's terrible? That's an outcome you can't control. Instead of, can I show up and write this scene today? That's a process you can control. So the process question always has an answer. The outcome question sends you into a spiral. It's something in the future that doesn't exist yet. So here are some practical reframes you can use. Instead of, I need to know if this is working before I keep going, think, I need to finish it before I can know if it's working. And if it's not, I have to ask better questions and keep writing it until it does work. Instead of, what if this whole thing is a waste of time, think, well, what does my character do next? Like, you have to stay focused on the work at hand, the scene at hand. Instead of, I don't know if I can pull this off, think, I don't need to know that yet. I just need to write this scene. Instead of, I want this to be good, which is very vague, think, this needs to exist first, so I'll make it good later, but let me just get started. Once you get started, that gives you momentum. Don't worry about the future outcome. Instead of, am I doing this right? Think, what's one way this scene could go? Instead of, what will readers think of this? Think, what does this character think? What do they want? Notice the shift. You're moving from evaluation and judgment, which paralyzes, to action, which creates momentum. You're allowed to write without it being good yet. You just have to get started. And you don't have to evaluate yourself every step of the way. You're allowed to focus on the process and let the outcome take care of itself. It will. In fact, that's the only way this works. You can't evaluate your way to a finished book. You can't judge your way to a strong craft, a strong command of the craft. You have to make, and then later, much later, assess what you made. Every published author you admire did this. They wrote messy drafts. They created scenes that didn't work. They developed characters they weren't sure about. They showed up and engaged with the process. They changed the point of view. They changed the person in which it was written. They engaged with the process day after day without knowing whether the outcome would be successful or not. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop obsessing about outcomes and focus on process, you often get the outcome that you want because you actually finish things, because you develop the skills. You build a much deeper and richer story because you make decisions and keep moving forward instead of second guessing every step. The writer who asks what happens next and writes the scene, even imperfectly, ends up with a completed draft they can revise and deepen and make better. The writer who asks, is this good enough? Am I good enough? Should I keep doing this? And then rewrites the same chapter for 6 months ends up with nothing to work with. And here's what's really interesting. The completed draft, even if it's messy, is actually closer to being good than the endlessly revised first chapter. Because now you have something to revise. You can let it rest. You can read it objectively and identify problems later and then fix them. You can show it to beta readers. You can work with an editor. None of that is possible if you never finish because you're too busy judging yourself, judging your writing. So process is the only thing that gets you to the finish line. Outcome focus keeps you spinning in place. So for the next week, every time you sit down to write, notice what questions your brain asks. Write them down. For example, is this scene good enough? Will readers like this? Will they find it interesting? Am I wasting my time? Is this boring? Don't judge these questions. Just notice them. And then for each outcome question, create a corresponding process question. Outcome. Is this scene good enough? Is it interesting enough? Process. What does my character want in this scene? What's standing in his or her way? Outcome. Will readers like this character? Process. What does this character care about? What is he or she afraid of losing right now? Outcome. Am I wasting my time? Process. What happens next in this story? What am I excited to write? So you want to start each writing session maybe with a concrete process in place. Instead of sitting down to work on your novel, sit down with a specific process task. Write the confrontation scene between character X and character Y. Figure out what your protagonist wants in Act 2. Describe the setting where the key scene happens. Write 3 different ways your character could react to bad news. Make the task concrete and completable. And create a rule for yourself. You don't evaluate while you create. When you're in a writing session, you write. No stopping to judge whether it's good. No deleting sentences. No rewriting the same paragraph 5 times. Schedule separate sessions for the evaluation and revision. Draft in some sessions, revise in others. You never want to do both at once. And finally, redirect when outcome questions come up, because they will show up. That's human. The goal isn't to never have the thought, is this good enough, or am I good enough? The goal is to recognize it as an outcome question, acknowledge it, and redirect to a process question. So instead of thinking, well, this scene is boring, well, that's a judgment. It's an outcome judgment. You want to redirect. What's happening in this scene right now? What does my character want? Your brain might say, no one is going to want to read this. Well, outcome anxiety. This is about an unknowable future. So redirect. My job right now is to write the story, not predict its reception. What happens in the next chapter? So when your brain wanders toward outcome questions, gently redirect it back to process questions over and over. Eventually, process thinking becomes your default. So here's what I want you to take away from this episode. Your struggles, whether they show up as abandoning drafts, perfecting outlines, character development confusion, or lack of courage or confidence, are probably not what you think they are. They're usually a result of a fixation on outcome. And the solution isn't to find more courage, more discipline, or even better craft knowledge, although that will help you. The solution is to shift your focus from outcomes you can't control to processes you can. What will my character do next? Not, is this good enough? What does my character want right now? Not, will readers like this character? What's one way this scene could go? Not, what's the perfect way to write this? Process questions have answers. They give you somewhere to go. They build momentum. Outcome questions are like quicksand. They keep you stuck, spinning, anxious, and unproductive. You already have everything you need to write your book. You don't need more courage. You don't need more time. You don't need to be better yet. Just stay in the game and you will get better. You just need to show up and engage with the process. One scene at a time, one question at a time, one writing session at a time. The outcome will take care of itself. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform. And if you're listening on Apple, please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.